Hi, and welcome. Hope Zvara here, the creator of Core Functional Fitness and the Hope process. And today I'm talking about the pelvic floor. For many people, the pelvic floor is either an area of concern and shame or just an area of confusion where they hope they're using the pelvic floor. They've been told it's their bathroom muscles and to squeeze, but aren't really sure if they're feeling the right things. And so today is all about kind of debunking the pelvic floor, getting to the very basics, and helping you understand this really vital area. Because the reality is everything feeds into the pelvic floor. Our arms and legs, our back, our upper chest, all eventually feed down into this really important area. So when we understand something, we really empower ourselves to use that something even more, and hopefully the way it's designed to. So when we think about the pelvic floor, a lot of people call it our bathroom muscles. But just thinking about your bathroom muscles, there's more to it than that. Because for many people, when they're taught the pelvic floor, they're most likely squeezing their glutes, which is more of a large superficial muscle or an outer layer muscle that doesn't necessarily guarantee that they're using those deeper rooted muscles. So I'm going to draw a diagram, and I have to, excuse me, I'm not the greatest artist, but you'll get the point. Okay, so our pelvic floor structurally kind of looks like a diamond. And if you're familiar with yoga, we have our root chakra, which is Muladhara, and it's shaped in this same shape. For women, I always like to point out, if you ever wear workout or yoga pants, there's this triangle vent on the bottom to help your privates breathe, and it kind of looks like that. So just giving you some visuals. I also have my trusty pelvis. This is actually a female pelvis. And the bottom kind of looks like a triangle. And that triangle, when we start to label these areas, we're going to label each point on the triangle. So this is our pubis, which is in the front, okay? And when we're trying to find the pubis, if you were to unzip a pair of pants, where the zipper ends, there's a bony protrusion down there, that is your pubis bone. And then we have our sitting bones, or the ischial tuberosities. I'm just going to put SB on this side. And then finally, in the back, we have our tailbone. And that's pretty easy to find. You can just kind of touch back there and feel that little pokey protrusion. It's really important to know these areas because this is the framework that helps our pelvic floor kind of sling together. So just like you'd set up a hammock, you have a frame, then you put the little things on each end, and then the fabric in the middle is what you would sit on. Well, the fabric in the middle of your structural hammock is what you sit in. It's what all of your organs sit in. It's what the top of your core has support beneath it, which is your pelvic floor. So when we think about this, looking down from an aerial view or looking up from the bottom, it kind of looks like a triangle. Now, this structure is really important because it's going to help you get some framework for your pelvic floor. And if you're not sure where your sitting bones are, if you kind of feel underneath your glute tissue, there's these two little protrusions, and those are your sit bones. Or you often feel them when you sit on the hard floor. That's going to be the corners of your pelvic floor. Now, we're going to mainly focus on female anatomy, but I am going to reference some male anatomy as well because they are very interwoven with just some slight small differences. So we're going to start at the back. And at the back is your tailbone. And just forward of that is your anal sphincter. So here's your tailbone, and just forward of that is going to be your anal sphincter. Okay? This is a really important area because your sphincter muscle is about 2 to 3 centimeters long, about the length of your pinky nail. And you have the ability to push out. We all know that because we push a bowel movement out. But you also have the ability to pull in. And this is a really great thing to understand, because if you struggle with something like hemorrhoids, maybe you have bowel issues, maybe you have some incontinence issues in the anal area, this is an area that you can start to bring back to life. You can actually contract on your anal sphincter. And in yoga, energetically, this is a really important part, because that Muladhara kind of is just one of those outlets, is the anal sphincter. So we're trying to bring energy up the body, but more importantly, we also just want to support our organs that are inside our torso, relying on this pelvic floor to support them. Okay, so your anal sphincter is back by the tailbone. So if you're sitting nice and tall, or if you want to lay down, you're welcome to. I want you to think about that area of the body. I always tell my students, if you can't think about it, how are you going to turn it on? And if you don't know where it is, how are you even going to be able to think about it? So now that we know where the anal sphincter is, I want you on a nice exhalation to think about contracting that anal sphincter like you're pulling it inside out. And then relax it out. And sometimes you might notice that when you relax it on an inhale, it kind of opens up and you feel pressure down. That's when you know, oh, I actually did something. Now, don't be discouraged if you feel like I have nothing happening there. For many people, they tend to be dominant in one or more of the pelvic floor areas that we're going to talk about today than another. And it just takes time. Just as though you have a disconnect with your phone or wiring in your house, the same can happen in your body. We have what's called proprioceptors, which are little feelers in our muscles and in our fascia that talk back with our brain. And a lot of times those have been desensitized or deadened, and we kind of have to bring them back to life, bring electrical stimulation back there, awareness back there, in order for them to recommunicate with the body. It is possible. I've done it, and I've done it with dozens of students. So we have our anal sphincter. We're engaging upward and inward, and just see if you can hold that. Can you hold it for 10 counts? Can you hold it for 20 counts? Can you hold it for a minute? And just slowly working your way up to building up those muscles. It's no different than doing a bicep curl or gaining the strength to carry your 2-year-old. You've been working on that over time to build up that strength. And we're going to do the same thing with the anal sphincter. Okay, the second point, so we have the anal sphincter back by the tailbone. The second point is going to be the vaginal passageway. So when we think about the vaginal passageway, okay, here, we think about the central part of the pelvic floor. If you've ever delivered a child before, this is where you give birth. And so this opening here, or what we call an orifice, is the most central opening or the most central part of our pelvic floor. For many people, this can be one of the more difficult areas to feel a contraction, but it is a very important part of the pelvic floor. So when we have that support, we can really be able to support things like placenta previa, vaginal prolapse or uterine prolapse. And so I myself have suffered from vaginal prolapse or vaginal wall prolapse after my 4th son. He was very large and he was kind of stuck sideways for a period of time. And so I really had to recommunicate with my body to be able to aid that and kind of bring that back to life. And I was able to make some significant progress with that. And I no longer have those issues that I have, which is awesome. But I did the work. And so when we think about our vaginal passageway, okay, it's the middle or central orifice in our pelvic floor. We're thinking about engaging up like we would hug a tampon or like you would engage during intercourse. A lot of people like to reference this, men and women, that if you've ever gone into a body of water, a bathtub, a lake, or the ocean and it's cold, and you kind of internally hug yourself, you're actually engaging in this main area, and that engagement helps you to hug or activate internally. So when we engage on the vaginal passageway or the perineal line, this helps us really get that drawing in and upward support. And a lot of times when we can engage here, we also feel an engagement kind of internally in our belly, and that's a really good sign. Because we have our pelvic floor, then we have kind of the pelvic bowl above it. It's not really a bowl, but it's kind of a sling that holds our organs. And then we have that rectus and that transversus that's around our tubular core as well that supports us. So again, sitting or laying down, thinking about that area can you engage on the central part of your pelvic floor? And what you might find is that other areas also want to engage, and that's okay, but I want to see if you can really zone in on the pelvic floor itself. Okay? And for men, this is obviously not going to be an orifice, but it's actually going to be the soft tissue behind the scrotum. So behind the scrotum, there's tissue that actually kind of bowls out or domes. And when you exhale and contract, it actually kind of comes concave in an inverted position. So you're drawing up and in. They're going to see a much more physical change than a woman would necessarily see or feel. All right. And then that last one is going to be up by the pubis bone, so here. And we have our clitoris up there, but inside, a little bit more forward to the clitoris, we have the urethra. And the urethra is where we urinate, and it's what controls our bladder. This point is often fairly easy to access for people because we've all done it. You've stopped yourself in the middle of a flow of urine. You're essentially using your pelvic floor muscles to shut off that flow. So again, sitting tall or on your back, laying long, see if you can contract on that front pelvic floor contraction or point. When you do that, what you may start to feel is that lower front abdomen. And for women, it tends to be a major problem area. And I see this a lot because what we're doing is we're just being taught navel to spine, okay, or contract here, rather than contract from the bottom, which feeds into an instant contraction in your core here. So we're just skipping a step, essentially, is what people are doing, but this step is really, really important. So we have our anal sphincter, we have our perineal line, or for women, our central orifice, the vaginal passageway, for men, the soft tissue behind the scrotum. And then we have, all the way up by the clitoris and the pubis bone, we have what's called the urethra. And for men, it's going to be just more of a thinking about where that pubis bone is to get that to contract. A lot of times, it's much like flexing an erection. They'll be able to use that perineal line and that urethra line, or that urethra point, and to help contract the pelvic floor. So again, a nice physical visual for them to be able to connect with. So when we think about the pelvic floor, these 3 points of contraction, for women 3 orifices, for men only 2, and we have this outer structure, just knowing that we have an interweaving of many muscles webbing together. So we have muscles that just run along the outer lines of the pelvis. We have muscles that string into the center. We have muscles that go front to back. We have muscles that are crossing. We have hip muscles that feed into the pelvic floor and vice versa. So we have this really great interweaving to support us. And so when we don't have that support, we have things like urinary incontinence, we have prolapse issues, we have maybe bowel issues, we have hemorrhoid issues, we can even have things like hip pain and back pain, even neck and shoulder pain, jaw pain, because the pelvic floor is out of sync. Now, I also want to encourage you, if you are someone that maybe has been recently pregnant, or maybe it's been a few years, when our pelvis or our hips are off, it can also create pelvic floor issues. So if we have a hip that's rotated forward, or maybe our pelvis is off, or our tailbone is off, not only can that create pain and discomfort, but it can really create a disconnect of communication for your pelvic floor back with your brain, for your body to be able to do what it belongs. Because if body parts aren't where they belong, they can't do their job the way that they're designed. So that's where a really good chiropractor can come in handy to really be able to help you put yourself back in place so that you can use the right muscles to train your body the right way. All right, so this is just series 1 of your pelvic floor. I want you to really kind of get familiar with your body. If you're comfortable touching these areas of the body, awesome. I run a full class. It's my core functional fitness, functional foundation training. It's also online. We'll actually take you through the pelvic floor and take you through 17 different exercises to help you identify these landmarks, and also the different sides of the pelvic floor, how to activate it in more detail so you can really feel confident in those body parts. But until next time, thank you so much for joining me. Namaste.